Dual rates are one of the most beneficial features you're going to use on your radio system, so let's get familiar with how they work. We'll use the Aurora 9 as an example, using our test model that we've set up, our test video model that we've set up in previous clinics. We'll go ahead and turn the system on, and we'll go ahead and tell it to transmit. Yes. And now we're communicating with our receiver. We verified our receiver voltage and also our transmitter voltage here. So we're ready to go. We have the aileron channel connected. We'll bring up our servo gauge. You can see that our aileron channel is connected, so we can use that for demonstration purposes. 100% travel right now is available on the channel. It's fully engaged. So we're going to go ahead and take this as it was set up. We're going to go into the setup menu for the model, which is a little wrench here, settings menu. We're going to go to the model tab, and we're going to choose DR and EXP. That's dual rates and exponents, or exponentials. So we'll go into there, and let's get familiar with the screen very quickly. DR and EXP menu, we're in normal mode right now. Aileron, elevator, and rudder channel selections are right there. So we're going to start with the aileron channel, and that's the one we're going to mess with today. This does show the rates, the current rates, left 100%, right 100%. So we have full rates going to our servo. And this little graph will show us our relative position of the channel at a given time. So if we have anything put in, we can see that indicated. Now that comes in really handy when you do the expos. On the dual rate, so it'll also show us 100% down to 0% travel on the graph. This diagonal line is actually the movement, the linear movement on your servo. And as we move that down towards the center line, it's less travel. So we'll verify that after we do our dual rate settings. We have our reset. So if we dial in some expos on a particular channel, we can reset it just by hitting that reset button. Go over here. A reset button. One of the nice things about the Aurora 9 as well is you can select both channels at the same time by touching the L or the R. We'll add that dual selection on or off. And a lot of times when you're making your dual rate adjustments, you want to do it to both left and right directions, so it's nice to be able to select both and make those changes. The last thing we need to get familiar with is down here on the switch null. Right now it's set to null, which means nothing. By default, when you go into your expos on a new model setup, and your dual rates and expos on your new model setup, it's going to have no switches assigned to this function and nothing dialed in. So first thing we need to do is assign a switch. Now, there are two switch quadrants on the Aurora 9. Your left and right switch quadrants are A through F. So switch A is a far left switch, 2-position switch, and switch D is a far right position, 2-position switch. I like to use these two switches on dual rates just because it's right at the tip of my index fingers when I'm flying. I don't have to look down at my transmitter or feel for another switch. It's right there. The whole time I fly, I actually keep my fingers right there, especially on an airplane, so I can always quickly affect those changes on my rates. So we're going to use the right one. I use my right for my aileron and my left for my elevator. You can use whichever switch you want. In fact, you can use a 2-position switch for all of the rates. So you can actually set your dual rates up for your aileron, your elevator, and your rudder and run it off the same switch. It doesn't have to be on separate switches. So for today, we're going to go ahead and run this off of just the ailerons off of one switch. So the first thing you do is go in and select a switch. So switch null. Null means nothing. We're in that setup now. We'll go ahead and choose select. So we can choose a switch, and this gives us a graphical depiction of all those switches in the quadrant. A through H are available to us. We can choose any one of those. I'm going to go ahead and choose that D switch because it's handy for me for ailerons, and then I'll exit out of that. It shows switch D has been selected. Exit again. Now this also indicates, on the next screen we'll see it as well, the switch position. So now we have switch D assigned, and this little icon or this little indicator up here with the 0 shows us our switch position. In the up position it says 0, down is 1. That's important when we make changes to our dual rates, so we can always remember or see which mode we're in. You don't want to get messed up and have maybe your right set to your low rate on switch position 0 and your left set to high rate. So always verify the switch position. Forward is 100% for this particular configuration. I like my high rates when I have all my switches forward when I start up. I'm going to go ahead and concentrate on switch position 1, which is going to be my low rates. So let's go ahead and select both of those surfaces. We'll take a look at our servo gauge overlay. And as I make changes to this, we're in that mode of switch position 1. As I make changes, it'll happen real time on the servo. So I'm going to start reducing that travel, and immediately, as I move the stick, I start losing throw. Another way we can do this too is to go back and we'll reset, and we'll hold the switch over while we make the changes. As we watch our overlay, you can see it go all the way down to actually 0%. So we're sitting there at 0, and we've pretty much dialed out every single bit of movement in that channel. We don't want that, so let's go ahead and take that back up to 50%. If you don't know, 50% is a fairly safe setting on a lot of models, especially part flyers. If you don't have instructions to tell you what they need to be, typically your manual's going to tell you what your low and rate recommended settings are, low expos and high, or low rates and high rates for as they apply to throws. So you're going to take a look at what your, it's going to give you a dimension or a distance, and it'll say, okay, in low rates it needs to be 1 inch of deflection. In high rates it needs to be 1.25 inches of deflection. So we can verify that by using a pitch gauge or a throw gauge. And this is a common throw gauge I use. It's I think Great Plains manufactures this one. It's a Great Plains throw gauge. It shows it in both millimeters and also in English measurements as well. So you have your control surface lined up with the 0 to start off with. You just clamp this on the horizontal stabilizer or the wing or whatever, and it's going to show you your 0 position. So you line that up, and then as you throw your gauge or you throw your deflection off to the right, it may be aileron up or aileron down, or if it's elevator, pull down, it'll put the elevator up. You're going to check that total distance that it throws. And what you can do is dial in your amount of rates on low rates to match what it's recommending for low rates. Now what you want to do first is verify your high rates and adjust your linkage. So when you go 100% to the left or right up in high rates, you're throwing the control surface the recommended deflection amount. And then what you want to do, and you can adjust your linkage to where that comes in nice and close, either choke up on the control horn or move out on the control horn, or vice versa on the servo horn. And once you have those maximum throws there, then all you have to do is dial in those dual rates on your low rates, to the deflection for the low rate distance recommended by the manual. And that's it. You've adjusted your rates, and that's the most common way to get your model up in the air and controllable the way that the manufacturer intends it to be controlled. So we can also see in that graph, again, as I referred to, when we switch back and forth, we can see 100% distance and 50% distance. I can also verify by my switch position being in 1 or low rates towards me that left and right are both at 50%, and up sets them at 100%. So typically commonly you'll use dual rates and expo together, but I'll tell you, I use dual rates a lot just on their own. I mean, I'm fairly smooth on the sticks for my style of flying, so it's not a real big deal to take advantage of those expos for me. So dual rates are the first thing I do, is I dial in my dual rates and get my deflections the way the manufacturer recommends. So when I go out and do my test flying, I get a true representation of what the designers or the engineers intended when they put the model together. So that's dual rates. You'll use them regularly, get comfortable with it, and it's actually the next step after setting up your servo reversing and your sub trimming in your complete programming method, is to go through and do your dual rates and then finally your expos if you choose to put those in.